So our first question to our panelists are, what are some ways to organize and plan for the college application process to reduce stress and to be more time effective? So I'll start with Maddie on this one.
Okay, so I'm just going to say one word to start this off. Spreadsheets. Please do yourself a favor and make yourself a college spreadsheet. My spreadsheet probably saved me more times than necessary. List all of your schools, and it's really nice to list literally everything that needs to be submitted, all the deadlines, and just keep track of everything in one place. Actually, I have a template that I made from my spreadsheet, so I can link that if you guys want. I'll just need to get it. But that's my one major advice for keeping organized is please make a spreadsheet. If someone else wants to go off of that while I get this link, I'll drop it in the chat.
Yeah, I agree with that. Spreadsheets are really helpful. You can also create like a Google Doc if that's better for you. It depends on your style. If you like working better on paper or like online, you can also do like a physical copy of like a spreadsheet, I guess, in your notes. It's just up to you. And then also a big note is to plan ahead. If you haven't started yet over the summer, don't worry about it. It's completely fine. But make sure that by like September and stuff, you have everything together and you know like all your deadlines.
Something that I would add is, oh no.
No,
okay.
you go.
Oh, thank you. So something that I would add is making sure you kind of have an idea of your priorities for colleges. So for me, I am, for example, electrical and computer engineering. So I made sure to find colleges that had good programs that I was interested in. I also had like location requirements in terms of like I didn't want to go abroad. I wanted to stay on the East Coast. And so that'll also help you kind of filter through potential choices. Because I remember I was looking into like U Chicago, for example. I heard that it was an amazing school, and then I found out that there wasn't the engineering program that I was looking for. And that not only can help you reduce the amount of like essays you have to write, but also if and when college trips become a thing, it can reduce the number of college trips you actually want to go on. Because if I had visited U Chicago, it would have been kind of useless for what I wanted to do. But I would emphasize that as well as the spreadsheets and compiling deadlines and everything, just all the information in one place.
I totally agree.
Oh, sorry.
You can go.
Oh, I wasn't gonna say anything important. I was just like,
Okay. Yeah, definitely keeping track of deadlines and starting as early as you can, especially if you do have a lot of time on your hands over the summer. But if you don't, then that's totally okay. Yeah. So you can't be sure that you're going to get into a school early. I think that was a mistake that I did when I waited until early results and then I started writing my essays, and I only had 2 weeks to write over 20 essays. And also just kind of setting your priorities straight, like what Caitlin said, because I think I applied to definitely too many schools, and that was really stressful because I had to write a lot of essays. And later on, when I was looking back, I was thinking some of these schools I didn't actually know that much about and I didn't really care about. So definitely making sure that you actually research the school and know why you want to go there.
Alice or Zoe, do you want to add on?
Oh, no, I think they've pretty much summed up all I wanted to say. Yeah, just like make sure you pay attention to the deadlines. Deadlines so important because if you miss a deadline, like there's no way that you're gonna like turn back time and like submit stuff. That's not gonna happen. And really be organized because like during the college admissions process, like it is a super chaotic time for you. You're not only handling college stuff, but you're also still having to like balance school. Like make sure like you're keeping your grades like consistent. You do not want to be dropping, like if you have an A but you're dropping from an A to a C, like that's a no-no. Like from an A to a B is fine, but like make sure you're keeping your grades consistent or else it's gonna look bad to the school. But yeah, just really be organized.
yeah. One thing that I would add is something that I think Caitlin said, which was you should try to narrow down the amount of schools that you apply to. I know there's a lot of people who apply to like 20, 30 schools, but I would just say that workload is like huge. And especially if you have like a close deadline, it can be a lot of mental stress. So I mean, like I know that we can't do like college visits like this year especially, but be sure to do your research and on your panel, on your major, especially to figure out if the school is a good match for you.
one last thing I want to add, I think a couple people have been asking this in the chat, is the number of schools to apply to. So this obviously varies for everybody based on the amount of money they have to submit applications, as well as time. But for me, I applied to 10 schools. I felt like any more, it would have kind of been like a little ridiculous, just because when you think about the amount of time and also money you have to put into each application, I didn't really want to put that much more. And then in terms of a breakdown, something that my guidance counselor recommended was, I believe, around maybe like 3 reach schools, like 3 to 4 safeties, and then the rest of them would be targets. But something to also remember is that the categories of safety, target, and reach, they do help in terms of figuring out like where your SAT score might match up in terms of previous admission statistics, or like the admission rate for previous years. But something that I had to learn during the college applications process is that everything is kind of random to some extent. There were some target schools that I applied to, or some safety schools I applied to that I didn't get into. And then there were some reach schools I applied to that I got in, despite having like a lower admissions rate or higher SAT scores necessary. So it is important to kind of keep in mind those 3 different categories and make sure you're not applying to too many reach schools or too few safety schools. But at the end of the day, it is somewhat kind of randomized just based on the number of people who are applying to every school. And also the fact that like good grades do help, but making sure to have good extracurriculars, good essays, and just have like a well-rounded application is also very important when you're going into the college application process.
Our next question, I believe Athena briefly touched upon, but what is one thing you regret you did or did not do during the college application process? And then we can just start again with Maddie.
Okay. So there are a few things, but I can start with the major one, which was not starting my essays early. Please, 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 please don't write your essays on January 1st. Don't do it. It's a really bad idea. If you start in August, I know some friends who did this and they had all their essays done really early and then just sort of laughed at us because the rest of our friends were just like, oh my God, I need to write 3,000 words tonight. Sounds like a plan. So if you do them early, you will be okay. But if you do them last minute, 1, the quality is probably going to suffer because you're stressed and you're trying to beat a deadline. And 2, a lot of schools have Y essays, which we'll probably touch upon later, and you're not going to have the time to do detailed research if you're writing it the day the essays do. Other than that, I regret things in terms of not applying to more scholarships, because a lot of scholarships that are big have earlier deadlines, so they will coincide with your college deadlines. So like Coca-Cola and ones like that have deadlines that are pretty early. So even though you're doing college apps, it's also a good idea to get an idea of when your scholarship apps are due at the same time. So like this summer is a good time to get your deadlines sorted.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Maddie on making sure that you stick with the deadlines, and the scholarships are definitely something that I wish I applied for more. I actually found a scholarship database of like over 300 scholarships, and I missed most of the deadlines for them later on. But another thing was also what I touched upon with applying to too many schools, especially schools that I realized were not actually a good fit for me. I'll send the database in the chat later. You guys are very lucky. But I applied to 22 schools, which I do not recommend because it was very stressful, and I finished 20 of those applications in 2 weeks, right before January 1st. And later on, I was reflecting, I got a lot of wait lists. I don't want to discourage you guys from applying, but so for example, I got waitlisted from Harvard, and I was writing my letter of continued interest, and I was trying to figure out why I wanted to go there. So I was going to say, I feel like I want to go to Harvard because, and then I realized I just didn't have a specific reason except for the fact that it was the name or the prestige. So definitely just making sure that the schools that you apply to are actually schools that really matter, because when it really comes down to it, even if the school has a good name, then like it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be the best fit for it. And I think college admissions officers will definitely see that. So definitely making sure that the school that you actually applied to is somewhere that you would actually really want to go.
Definitely agreed. I actually had that same thing with Columbia. I was writing like the Why Columbia essay, and like the only thing I could really think of was like it's in New York, but then I was like, wait, that's probably the worst answer I could possibly give. And I guess my advice would definitely be, again, like to keep track of your deadlines and also to check your email frequently and also check your spam folder. So I actually missed my Columbia interview because I didn't check my email. And so like I emailed them like a week late. I was like, hey, can I have my interview still? And they were like, no. So don't do that.
I would definitely reiterate what Alice and Asina said about making sure that you actually know why you're applying to schools, because I applied for Harvard, but Harvard is not necessarily as a good of a fit for me in terms of electrical and computer engineering, so I kind of wasted like $80 on that. My piece of advice is kind of geared towards interviews. So some schools give interviews with alumni, and so this is a chance for you to talk to alumni about their experience with the school, as well as kind of sell yourself. But for me, I didn't emphasize the former as much as I should have. Something I regret not doing was preparing questions beforehand about different programs or different like ways that they utilize the school, just because I felt like I asked really generic questions that definitely could have been answered on by looking through the admissions website. And you have an actual graduate of that school right there, so you can really get a lot more information about the programs they were a part of, what they liked about the school, and especially because admissions websites are always going to kind of gloss over the more difficult parts of the school, or like the less savory parts of what they enjoyed. I think it's always, again, like, yeah, I regret not using those people as more of a resource to learn more about the school, especially later on when I had to maybe write my like why that school essay or my letter of intent after being waitlisted. So I would definitely recommend that.
I just want to reiterate scholarships again. Like, I also regret not applying to more scholarships, especially if it's the summer before your senior year. This is like the ideal time to apply to them. And if you don't have any practice writing the sort of essays that are on college apps, scholarships are kind of like practice, I guess, because they have similar prompts. So if you're looking through scholarships, you might get like a sense of what the essays are like. Also want to reiterate, definitely make sure that the school is a good match and you can answer the why this school question with like a bunch of specifics, not just like one thing. And then for me, a piece of advice, this is very specific to me, but I found myself, if you guys know what SAT subject tests are, I don't know if those are still going on this year. Does anyone know?
Yeah, they're still going on this year.
Still a thing, yeah. So I found myself retaking this one test because I wanted to up my grade for it. I took it a total of 3 times. And that was just a waste of money and time. Like, I can tell you guys, the subject tests aren't like a really big deal unless you think that you can get a good score on it, like now without too much studying, then you should take those. But if you have to study a ton for them, I would advise against them because it's going to distract you from other aspects of the college application process. And funny story, the school that I'm going to, I applied early decision and I didn't even end up sending them that subject test score because I was still in the process of like retaking it. So yeah, I would just say, make sure you keep your priorities straight and don't like focus too much on the numbers, like the standardized test scores, especially subject tests, because they're not required.
Yeah, I think I'll go. I think definitely like what about like standardized testing, like what Nicole said, don't get hung up over the scores. At least from my perspective, although this is a controversial standpoint, standardized testing is just like College Board's way of like getting your guys' money. Like, if I'm putting it like really straightforward out there, some people can disagree with me, and that's okay. But I think that like don't get hung up over standardized testing, because personally I did, and that really affected the entire like college admissions process for me. And I think that like maybe have a realistic like idea or like perspective on where you're weak at and really like work on that and hone that, while also, and it is difficult, but while also kind of keeping your strengths like the way it is. like really work on your weaknesses. Like for me, my GPA, because I had a really interesting kind of experience because I moved to the States like mid-year junior year. And so that really like messed up my GPA and everything. So it was a really difficult time because I was dealing with that. And I think another thing, which is also another controversial standpoint, is I regret ever like going through like college advising. And college advising, it's a private business. And just like College Board, they're also very like profitable and like they're really out there to get your money. They're a business pretty much, So be realistic. Like I think you should also like, get your parents' standpoint on it because I did not include my parents a lot into the college admission process. I was like, it was me and my college advisor only, and I kind of regret that. But like, have a realistic idea of like what kind of person you are. Like, if you know that you can handle this like alongside with your parents and you don't need a college advisor, don't get one. Don't get one because they're out there for your money. But if you think you kind of do, then, and it's a huge investment because they're going to be taking a lot of like your parents' money. And so it is going to be a huge investment. And if you're absolutely sure that you need it, I think like you probably can like, I'm not sure, but you might be able to go through like a few trials with them and like sit down, talk to them and see like if they're able to help you, because if they are, like if they're able to like make you feel calm throughout the entire process, because it is a chaotic process, and still be able to like help you recognize the weaknesses and come up with like kind of like I guess a solution or like many solutions to help like kind of resolve your weaknesses, then I think you should go for a college advisor. But otherwise, like really, I think overall have a realistic idea of what kind of person you are and like where your weaknesses are. And so like you don't waste time worrying about other stuff and like stressing over other stuff because like there's only a limited number of time, you know what I mean? So yeah, that's just some advice.
Does anyone want to add on?
Sorry, I just topped in again because my Wi-Fi was cutting out. What was the question?
Oh, I'm about to ask the next question, so you're all good. Are there any resources that helped you the most when you were applying to college or just writing your essays?
Okay, I guess I can start. One thing that I found really helpful for the informational posts, not the rest of the stuff on there, but the Applying to College subreddit has some really good posts from verified admissions counselors that they have these large posts on timelines and what to write in your essays and tips for essays, etc. And I really found that and just general online research was really great for the whole process. There's also, I forgot exactly which site, but there's a site that has every question, like supplemental question from different colleges. That was really great. But I would really check out the A2C Reddit for the informational posts. I wouldn't get too caught up in the rest of the posts on there though, because it can just be like a wormhole and you get sucked into it, and that does not help you.
Yeah, adding on to that, all the stuff like, okay, that stuff is very helpful, but all the stuff that isn't helpful is all the chance me stuff, or it like
chance me.
Yeah, that's kind of BS. Like I feel like most people who do that sort of stuff are like parents of like people who are applying to college, so they can't really give you like an accurate assessment of your skills anyway. And since they're not admissions officers, they wouldn't really like understand the process as well anyway. And also I feel like it's quite toxic and can be really discouraging, so I wouldn't advise it.
Yeah,
For
I definitely.
me, oh no, not again. Okay. For me, the biggest resource was actually my friends. So something that's really important about your essays is that the people who are reading them don't know you, and you also only have like 650 words or 500 words. So basically like about a page to explain yourself, explain your story, explain why you want to go to that school. And when you're writing that essay, it's very easy to understand where you're coming from. So I reached out to a lot of my friends, and I think my entire school actually did this, where people were very freely sharing their essays, asking for advice, asking for comments. And that was extremely helpful for me just because I got someone else's eyes on it. I think I had like 50 people read my comment out before submitting it, including like my parents and family. But by having classmates who didn't know me as well read through it and not only edit it for grammatical mistakes and stuff, but then also just content was extremely helpful, especially because like I have a tendency to write too much. And so I couldn't really always figure out what to cut out of my essays. So that, I think for me, my friends were the biggest resource just because they were able to kind of give me an outside perspective of what my essays might look like to someone who didn't know me directly. And then I said this before, but alumni or current students of colleges are a very great resource. So I went to a school where a lot of people go to Cornell. So I was able to reach out to people to ask them, like, what are the classes like? What is it like for you to dorm there? What kind of clubs are you a part of? What's the culture like? And I did that for Cornell as well as a bunch of other schools. And they gave me an actual, like, honest answer. They said that some things are good, some things are bad. It wasn't the, like, kind of cookie cutter response you'll get from, like, a tour guide or from a website. And so I would just generally say, like, for the greatest resource just because they'll typically be honest with you and they'll also give you a lot of information that you wouldn't get otherwise.
I definitely agree with Caitlin that your friends are a very important resource. It's very important to have a strong support network. I also talked a lot with my guidance counselor. I would meet with her. She would read most of my essays. I also had my English teacher read my essays. But at the same time, I guess for me personally, I didn't want too many people reading my essays because they felt very personal to me. And I guess like when you're having people read your essays, take their advice, but also take it with a grain of salt sometimes, because when it really comes down to it, you want to be genuine to who you are, and it shouldn't be a reflection of what everybody else wants you to be. And backing off of that, I definitely did watch a lot of videos in which people were reading the college essays that got them into this school or that school, and reading them online about like the colleges that worked to get into Harvard, like that kind of thing, because some schools actually post example essays. And while they were kind of helpful, I definitely think I got into that wormhole of how am I going to write an essay as good as this one? And I would definitely say it's your story. It can really be about whatever you want it to be, and keeping that in mind is very important. I also saw a lot of free resources on the website called the College Essay Guide, and I would recommend checking out some of his free resources because he provides some things to get you started with brainstorming for your essays. And additionally, this isn't exactly for just getting into college, but studying for the SAT, I found Khan Academy to be super helpful with helping me prep for the SAT, and all for free, because I took an SAT prep course, but I felt like Khan Academy actually gave me the practice that I needed, and it was very personalized to my skills, as opposed to me just sitting in a classroom. So I would definitely recommend those two resources.
I totally agree with the getting people to read your essay. I would make sure don't get too many people too much advice, because then it doesn't sound like yourself. It's not genuine, like Athena was saying. But I also relied heavily on my guidance counselor and my English teacher. If you're not comfortable with having someone read it, then don't ask them, because if you have too many people, then it's just not going to sound like you. Another piece of advice, this is a little bit less formal, but if you want to figure out if a college is a good fit, you can totally just go to YouTube and watch the vlogs of current students there. It's like a lighthearted way to figure out how the college is. And I also wouldn't recommend reading too many example essays, because then it's going to stress you out a little more. So personally, I try to avoid reading example essays and just like brainstorming for my own before like getting help and everything.
Oh, should I go now? What was the question again? Sorry.
Are there any resources that helped you the most when applying to college?
I think Caitlin said something about friends, and definitely agreed to that. Yeah, like I only picked a small group of people who I trust, like, you know, their perspective and their ability to write, for them to look at my essays. And like I had some friends who weren't comfortable showing their essays, and that's totally normal. like it's a personal essay. It's super personal. So there's that aspect. I think, yeah, and I think also I told you guys about how like I regret not having my parents be super involved in the process, but I think that, like I said, like the entire process can really be a burden on your mental state. And so having a good kind of like support system is super important for your mental state, because you're dealing with like all of, all like the chaos and everything. Like, so having a good support system and like being able to rant to them about like your hardships or like all that stuff like is super important, because then like you'll have a clearer mind the next day and you'll be able to work on stuff. Yeah, so that's pretty much it.
Alex, is there anything you want to add, or do you want to move on to the next question?
I feel like everyone's already said, like, basically what I use. I feel good to move on.
The next question is, how did you guys decide on the majors and colleges that you wanted to apply to, and which ones?
Okay, so majors and colleges, right? So I sort of knew that I was applying for CS, and I sort of decided this, I think in my sophomore year, I pretty much solidified that I really liked CS from all the courses I'd been taking. So I took CS courses in school and also through another program I was in at NYU. So I sort of just realized that this is something I really enjoyed doing. So my major was pretty much set. So when I was building my college list, I obviously applied to a lot of the top CS programs. And I also just applied to other schools that I liked. And I tried to find schools that had really strong sort of departments for my major and that I was also really interested in. So fit is important, obviously. It's good to talk to other students, figure out what resources they have on campus. And then I basically built my list off of sort of strength in my major. So, yeah.
Yeah, for me, I'm planning to major in neuroscience with a minor in visual arts. And a lot of people, whenever I tell them that, they say, wow, that's very different and it's going to be kind of hard juggling with classes. But I just found that both of them are things that I really enjoy doing from what I did in high school, because I did a lot of things with both art and science. So I was in like Science Olympiad, and I competed in innovation challenges through the New York Academy of Sciences. I was in Simply Neuroscience, a nonprofit organization to promote neuroscience education. And I'm also the director of art at Grow Genius. So I really found that when I was looking at colleges, I wanted an interdisciplinary focus. So a school that would allow me to combine my interests, or at least do a double major or minor in both of them. And I found that with neuroscience, it was kind of it was a meaningful way to make an impact on the world. So I could enter the fields of healthcare or do research on, say, neurodegenerative diseases, because my grandfather actually had Alzheimer's and he passed away in January. And I found that ever since then, I've been really getting into neuroscience. And with art, that's always just something that I've liked to do, just kind of for fun with painting and everything. And I took AP art in high school, and I just found that there were things that I genuinely enjoy doing. So definitely when you're picking your major, find something that fits your talents, but also is something that you can do for the next 4 years.
And beyond.
Yeah, and beyond as a career.
I would build off of that and say that, so to start off, it's good to have an idea or some sort of idea of what you want to major in, but you can change your major in school. So most schools, at least at Cornell, and I think most in general, have you declare your major by the end of sophomore year, which basically means that you kind of get priority for upper level classes or elective courses. But even after sophomore year, you can change your major. So I had a friend who was interested in electrical and computer engineering, but then later on she realized she was more interested in data science and languages, so she changed her major multiple times actually. And obviously that's something to consider when you're looking at the length of time you want to spend in college and the requirements for any major that you want to switch into. That's just something to keep in mind, that it's like not full stop, you choose your major when you apply and that's it. Also, something I want to emphasize is the importance of minors, or at least just taking classes outside of your major. So for me, I'm an electrical and computer engineering major with minors in computer science and business. And for me, I was thinking about doing a double major in ECE and CS, but then I decided to just do a minor because I realized that the courses that I wanted to take that were not major required were more of my focus, versus I didn't really want to focus on the theoretical courses for CS. And for me, I decided to not go through a double major because I really wanted to still take CS courses, but I didn't want to push myself too hard to do the double major. So that's something to consider. But something to also consider is that if you don't complete the minor, it's not the end of the world. At least for Cornell, they don't even write our minor on our degree. So as long as you take classes that are applicable to whatever field you want to go into, whatever skill set you want to kind of gather in order to pursue whatever career you want, I think that's the most important thing, because years down the line, they're not going to ask you, oh, did you take intro to circuits in your sophomore year? No, they're going to ask you, do you know how to make this circuit, or do you know how to code this program? So that's a piece on that. But for me, I chose ECE because I really enjoy getting hands-on. I also really thought it would be interesting to learn more about the entire tech stack. So not just computer science, so software engineering, because that was something I was originally interested in high school, but also the hardware behind it. So what makes a chip, what materials you use to make a chip, what electrical things happen in a circuit to make a certain line of code execute. And by becoming an ECE, I could learn more about hardware and software. And for me, that was really interesting because it kind of, at least in my opinion, broadens my interest in the tech field. And then in terms of figuring out the schools that I wanted, I think the previous couple panelists mentioned this, just like look into the programs. For me, looking into the types of courses they had, the different research labs that they offered, was really important, just to make sure that like if I did an ECE program, it was in the spaces that I actually wanted to focus on. So for me, it's robotics. And then I'm also a big proponent of making sure you have a well-rounded college education. So not just taking engineering courses or not just taking courses within your major. So for me, I chose Cornell because they really emphasize taking courses outside of your major. Whereas some other schools that I applied to, they had really strong engineering programs, but didn't really emphasize that as much. And so therefore, that's like why I ended up choosing Cornell. But yeah, that's a little bit more on my.
For me, I knew that I wanted to major in physics because at the time that's just what I was interested in, and I still am, based on the classes I took junior year, and I also got involved with a research group. So physics, I sort of knew about the major, and I decided that I was going to base my college choices sort of based on whether I would be able to get involved in research groups my next year, freshman year or sophomore year. So when I was looking at colleges, I was looking through the physics department page and sort of looking at different professors, seeing what research groups they're doing, and especially seeing if they allow undergrads to get involved, because that was like a major component of me in choosing my colleges. And then another thing I don't think anyone has mentioned is it's totally fine to narrow down your lists by like region or by whether you want to be in a city or not. So that's an important thing to try to figure out. Do you want to be like in a big city? Do you want to be near a big city, or do you want to be like in a rural environment far away from cities? So those were sort of the two big factors for me making the college lists.
My turn now? Yeah, okay. Sorry, what was the question again?
How did you decide on your majors and colleges you wanted to apply to?
What? Sorry, could you say that again?
How did you decide on the major that you applied to and the colleges that you were going to submit applications to?
Oh, okay. So for my major, so the funny thing is and this is it's really stressing me out, but where I'm going to go to, which is the University of Washington in Seattle, what they do, which is very, very evil from my perspective, is that they have this system called the capacity constrained major system. And what you have to do if you're like pre-sciences, you're gonna have to go through an extra admissions process to get into like whatever major you want, which is crazy. I know, like all you guys are like hearing me out, like you guys probably don't want to go to the school, and I'm not like just like I'm not like saying don't go to the school, and just saying like this school has a system that could really kind of like make you rethink it, like sorry, kind of like give you conflict about like choosing your major, because I'm planning to go to applied mathematics. That doesn't mean I'm guaranteed to get into applied mathematics. And so that's giving me a lot of stress. I think choosing your major, definitely like choose like what you're passionate about, but also, if I'm being realistic, what can like give you a sustainable income when you graduate, if I'm being honest. Because if you're going to like schools, it just like if you're like plainly like if you're going to college, they're taking your money. So like you should squeeze like every bit out of it, and like get a major which you kind of like, or like you like, or you're passionate about, but can also give you like a sustainable income. But I think anyone who's struggling to kind of like find a major that they particularly like, or like that they're just like you guys are struggling with it, I think, because I know, so like one of my mentors, so I think she went to U Chicago, and then she was on a pre-med track, and she was doing chemistry, but she came out working for the NSA doing like cryptography, which like logically has nothing to do with chemistry, but they were looking for someone who like could think out of the box. So like, just like go with something you like, but also profitable. And don't be too worried. Like you'll probably have until like sophomore year to decide like what you want to do, or like which is like what major you want to do. And I think, what was the second question again about colleges, like picking your college list?
Yeah, like how did you shortlist your college list?
By being realistic about like my abilities, if I'm going to be able to, like, one thing is being able to get into that school, but another thing is being able to like have a good mentality, and like just like I think being able to sustain yourself during the 4 years, because those 4 years are like, it's 4 years of your life. It's a big deal. So I think being realistic about my list was like contributed a lot to like me shortlisting which schools I wanted to apply to, because I didn't want to apply to a lot of schools because it's a lot of work. So yeah, that's my advice.
Yeah, so basically, okay, first off about me, I'm planning on going to Yale, and I'm planning on majoring in art with a concentration in painting and printmaking this fall. So I actually figured out that, well, I actually thought that about, I actually thought I was going to go to art school, you see, but then that changed. So I basically figured that out when I was about 10, because art was just something that I was really passionate about. And then from there, it sort of grew into, I had to like work really hard to improve my art skill. And I also did a lot of stuff that was like related to art, like, for example, art club, or, joining like art publications, doing art shows, stuff like that. So I actually have a different opinion. I think that majoring in something that you're passionate about is, like, I think that you should go for it, to be honest, because even though, a lot of people might think that art isn't really, especially fine arts, isn't a really sustainable career path. I feel like there's a lot of applications of an art degree that you can't really just dismiss. Like, for example, I know that on the earlier panel, you guys were talking about UI UX. Well, something like that, an art background is really, really helpful for that, because you get like the same sort of eye for design, you get the same color sense. And so I wouldn't say that like, and also, yeah, I definitely second what people said about like, it's really possible to just change your major. I also know a lot of people who applied to Yale with an undeclared major and they got in. So don't think that like, like having like an undeclared is like a death sentence, but I feel like it's definitely better to apply with something major-wise in mind.
So our last question before we have open forum is how a lot of people find that this process is really overwhelming and can definitely feel a lot of imposter syndrome, especially when after you submit applications. and acceptances of rejections start coming in. So what's your advice on taking care of your mental health while completing applications and dealing with rejections?
So for me, I'm from New York City, and I went to a specialized high school, which is super competitive when it comes to college applications. Like I mentioned, that a lot of my a lot of people from my school go to Cornell. Like 80 people a year get into Cornell. It's like ridiculous. So when college application season came around, you feel a lot of imposter syndrome because you hear about all of the like Ivy League and high institutions that people get into. And like for me, it sounds terrible retrospectively, but Cornell was like the only Ivy that I got into. And at first when that happened, I was really devastated about it. Not that I didn't like Cornell as a school, but I was like, oh, I could have gotten into MIT, or I could have gotten into Harvard, and I didn't. And that was kind of devastating to me. But then I took a step back and thought about it and looked at all the schools that I had applied to, and realized that, like, in my opinion, Cornell was the best fit for me. So something that I would really emphasize is that it's not about other people and where they get into college. Where they get into college is great for them, right? If your friend gets into Harvard, if your friend gets into Stony Brook, it's fine, right? They ultimately make the decision that's best for them. So don't let the the outcomes of other people's college applications process get to you. Because for me, there was the original thought that, like, oh my God, so many people from my school get into Cornell, it like doesn't mean anything at all. But in reality, that is kind of inconsequential to my Cornell experience. Like, I realized that I actually do very much enjoy the school, even if it does have a higher admissions acceptance rate than any other of the Ivies. Like, that doesn't really play into my time at Cornell. So that would be something to keep in mind, is just like, at the end of the day, you need to make sure that you feel comfortable with the school that you apply to, whether it's for the program, location, or cost. And if other people get into, like, quote unquote, like, higher tier schools, like, that's their thing, right? If it doesn't work out for you, it doesn't work out for you, as long as you feel comfortable at the end of the day with where you decide to go to college. That's like the most important thing in my opinion.
I also went to one of those schools that was like, my school was a boarding school specifically for STEM. So it got really competitive during college application season. And I was so stressed because of, like, again, comparing myself to everyone else in my school. I would just emphasize that make sure to have a strong support system and don't neglect time with your friends during the fall when you're applying. Make sure to leave time to, like, do fun things with them, go on walking trips, go get food, just de-stress. Don't talk about college every single second that you get. Make sure your life goes on as usual. And then also, I would make sure to prioritize your relationship with your family during that time, because you never know, your family might be there for you when you least expect it. I found myself, my sister lives in a different state because she's older. I found myself calling her a lot during that fall, just to, like, rant about things, because it was, like, a little uncomfortable ranting about college things to other people in my grade because they're, like, applying with me. So I was talking to her a lot. She was giving me advice, but yeah, it was just great to have a support system, and remember not to go through it alone. Have people there with you.
Okay, is it my turn now? Okay, imposter syndrome. So I got rejected from NYU, and I think I applied early, and at that point in time, I think I was so, like, two of my male friends got into, like, the CS program, whatever is in, like, their College of Arts and Sciences. I wasn't the only one. And it like, to be frank, like, it definitely sucked. Like, I got hung up over it for a long time, but I think, like, one time will probably help you get over it. I know that's, like, not the best advice, but I think comparing yourself to, like, other people won't do you any good. You're gonna go down this, like, the spiral. Like, you're gonna spiral out of control because you're constantly comparing yourself to other people. I think, like, again, like, be realistic with where you're at, and, like, there's only one of you, like, comparing yourself to other people, it brings up, like, a lot of anxiety. I think, more or less, kind of, like, it's hard let me tell you, it's hard, but I also think like having a good support system will help you, like if you're struggling with like imposter syndrome, will help you get you like right back on like the good track. So yeah, I mean, I have really bad advice for that. Sorry, guys.
I can say a few things on this. At least for imposter syndrome at my school, CS isn't very big and they're sort of competitive, but there were only 2-ish people applying for the same exact things I was. The only thing that sucked about that is that they were my 2 closest friends. So what's good for that is to just avoid talking about college, like everyone else is saying, as your main topic, because if it keeps coming up, then people get really stressed and it puts a strain on your conversation, definitely, especially when, let's say, like Cornell is coming out next week and your friend ED'd. Like, stop talking about it. Because it really stresses people out. So like other people were saying, like still like go get food, just do fun things and try to avoid stressing about college when you're with your friends excessively. It's a bad thing to fall into. Yeah.
And for like the last few minutes, we can have like open forum. So if there's any question that you guys want to ask, this is the time. You can unmute yourself and ask. Generally, we find that's like the best way. But we do have an event at 3:30. So if you want to ask quickly.
Can I ask a question? So for example, on your transcript, if every semester, the first semester you have high grades, but then it drops, like even if you tried so much, but like it dropped by a certain amount of points the second semester, and then like for each year it was like that, but you have a high GPA, like a 3.8, is that going to affect your admission process applying to top colleges like Yale, Columbia, Bernard? But then you try to compensate a high SAT score for like a 1500.
So I'd say for grades and test scores, I've been saying this in the chat, but they get you in the door, right? So having a certain SAT score, having a certain GPA is important because it does show in the context of like a structured academic setting, which not everybody can actually function in, but in a structured like testing academic setting that you can perform to some extent. You're able to kind of understand the material. I'd say if you have had typically good grades and there was only one moment where it might have dropped a little bit, that's typically fine, especially because colleges also look at the workload of that school. They know college admissions officers will know a little bit more specifics about your school, what classes they offer, how hard those classes are, because every school is different. And then also there's opportunities within most college applications essays to write about any extenuating circumstances, about like maybe a reason why your grades might have dropped. For me, like at some point during sophomore year, one of my best friends died. So like that led to a couple of like dropped grades, and they try to be as understanding as they can, considering that like thousands of people apply, but you do have a couple opportunities to kind of talk about that a little bit. But I do want to stress though that like test scores and grades are important, but making sure that you have good essays in your story, and then take part in extracurriculars that are that you're passionate about, that not necessarily correspond to your major, that isn't a requirement. Those are what will ultimately get you into the school, but the grades kind of get you into the door. Yeah.
Can I ask a question? What are some good extracurriculars if I'm interested in biotechnology and neuroscience?
I know for sure that if neuroscience specifically, Athena's a part of Simply Neuroscience. I've also been a part of it. It's a great organization, so I'd look that up.
I have a question. I go to a performing arts high school. I think Caitlin, you might know it because it's one of the specialized high school, but it's for performing arts. And I'm really interested in computer science, but don't know how to demonstrate it in my school because there aren't a lot of resources. Like AP computer science classes. I mean, there are a few, but it's just not that great. So besides like taking courses at school, like how can I show that I like want to major in it, other than the fact that I go for art and stuff like that?
Okay, well, one way you could do it is definitely like taking your own initiative to try to do different projects. For example, we had a panel on like earlier she was talking about front-end development, etc. So one thing I did is I made my own personal website. And you can also find things out of school. Like the research I did was through a program at Stony Brook called Seasire. So just finding opportunities online. I'm sure especially in the Girl Genius Slack, there's just a lot of opportunities. So finding things you can do outside of school, maybe even remotely, is a good way to get involved outside of your school.
Yeah, thank you so much.
What are some good activities to take on your last year of high school in general? Just not for a specific major, but in general.
I mean, I would just kind of emphasize that if you're going to take part in extracurricular, something that you enjoy. So for me, I became more involved in the National Honor Society at my school in my senior year, just because I really enjoyed taking part of that. But especially because extracurriculars in high school can be time consuming, I would just make sure that you look at all the opportunities within your school and see what kind of catches your eye. I don't think there's one that's that college them. They also don't want to apply and be a part of extracurriculars that they're not necessarily passionate about, because then they're just kind of doing it for the resume byline. So yeah, just like kind of look at what your school offers, and if they don't offer anything within like your kind of passions, you can also start your own club. Like I started a hackathon organization within my school because I noticed that I didn't do hackathon organizing when I was in high school, and like that was something I was really passionate about. So I would.
What would you say is a good amount of extracurriculars to be involved in so you're not overwhelmed?
It all depends on the person, I'd say. So like for me, I think I was a part of, I was a captain of the softball team, so that took a lot of my time. And then I was part of the National Honor Society and then organized hackathons. But other than that, like I didn't really do any other extracurriculars in high school. But I know people who did a couple more, just because the time commitment was a lot lower, and also they were able to kind of spread themselves better in terms of time. So it really depends on how much time you have outside of completing academic requirements within high school, and then also how much time it takes for each club, whether you want to be like a general member or a part of the.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. The number definitely depends on how much you're committing to each individual activity, because you can do like 30 things and spend like half an hour on them, but you could also have one activity that you take 20 hours a week on, and that shows commitment. So if you're spending a lot of time on one thing, don't feel like you need to be involved in 50. Like it's okay to be really, really involved in like these 3 things. That is perfectly fine.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think I even filled up my extracurricular thing. I think I had 9, and the maximum is 10 on the Common App. So just stick with what you're already doing. So.
I'm so sorry, but we have to transition into our animation workshop. But thank you so much for coming. We have tagged all of the panelists on Instagram, so if you want to reach out, you can reach out over there and probably find them on LinkedIn if you have any other questions. But thank you so much for coming to this panel. I hope you guys learned something.
Thank you guys.
One.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.